They weighed 1.5 pounds. They cost $2. And you bought them at the drugstore, in port, sherry, claret, or muscatel. One company, Vino Sano, advertised in a San Francisco newspaper as the manufacturer of the famous California grape brick. An analysis showed the bricks to be composed principally of grape pulp and sugar. The interesting part was printed on the packages. Dissolve brick and add 1 pound sugar to sufficient warm water to make a gallon. To prevent fermentation, add 0.1% benzoate of soda. Otherwise, it will ferment and turn to wine with an alcoholic content. The directions said to seal it with a safety vent and leave it 3 or 4 weeks. Read that once and it's a caution. Read it twice and it's a recipe. Complete step-by-step instructions dressed up as a warning. A North Carolina newspaper named the trick exactly. The bricks carried directions for the making of a fermented beverage, or rather directions how not to make one. And the last line isn't a warning at all. The longer you let it stay, the better it will taste. Which leaves one question: how was any of this legal? The answer is a single sentence in the Volstead Act, passed on October 28, 1919, Section 29. The penalties for making liquor without a permit, it said, shall not apply to a person for manufacturing non-intoxicating cider and fruit juices exclusively for use in his home, but such cider and fruit juices shall not be sold. The section never defined non-intoxicating. It named no quantity. That left the government to prove, glass by glass, that what sat in your cellar was intoxicating in fact. At least one company selling grape concentrate didn't hide behind that section. It printed it. A full-page ad in a Chicago newspaper offered a keg and told you it was legal in your home, then printed the citation in brackets. Under the provisions of Section 29, National Prohibition Act. In 1924, a sitting member of Congress tested that sentence in the least subtle way available. Representative John Philip Hill of Maryland made wine and cider in the cellar of his Baltimore house, and he invited the Commissioner of Prohibition to the party. He was tried for manufacturing and possessing them. His wine measured between 3.34 and 11.64% alcohol. Judge Morris A. Soper ruled the test was whether the drink was intoxicating in fact. The jury deliberated into the night and acquitted him. Hill gave his own verdict on the law: hypocritical, crooked, and marked by 2 standards. So the home cellar was, in practice, untouchable, and a country making wine in its own kitchens needs grapes. It needs them a long way from where they grow. That single requirement rewrote California. The Smithsonian puts it plainly. Red grapes survived the transcontinental journey, and it was easier to make a drinkable red than a stable, drinkable white. So the whites came out. White grapes were ripped out of vineyards to make room for the moneymakers. The red varieties like Alicante Bouschet and Zinfandel that produced deeply hued red wines. Alicante was the ideal grape for this trade, and none of that is a compliment. It survived the train, and what it gave was deeply hued. Color first, quality never the point. Then the trains. In 1920, more than 26,000 rail cars of California grapes made the trip east. By 1927, it was over 72,000. The railroads built grape distribution sites in Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, because that's where the customers were. California's vineyards went from about 300,000 acres in 1920 to 577,000 by 1927. They were still planting when the market broke. By 1926, supply was greater than demand, and the price went with it. About $60 a ton in 1926, $17 a ton by 1928. The customer's end of the trade is documented in unusual detail. That's because one company's own memorandum book ended up in the record of a federal prosecution. In the manager's own handwriting, keep the keg between 70 and 90 degrees, pull out the bung, cut the band, and leave it 3 weeks, preferably 4. Then siphon it off into glass and wait again. The book isn't coy about what's being made. In its own words, in 6 weeks' time, it is the same wine he had and used to drink before Prohibition. The same trial record carries the script the salesman used at the front door. Some people around here call me King Bootlegger. And in the questions put to men applying for the job, we operate in strict compliance with federal and state laws. Somebody tested the benzo weight of soda, the ingredient the label told you to add so the wine wouldn't happen. James L. Young, chemist of the Bureau of Industrial Alcohol, bought bricks, followed the printed directions, and added the benzo weight in the amount they recommended. He testified that it only slowed up fermentation. The jug containing the benzo weight of soda still was fermenting today and increasing its alcoholic content. A bottle treated the way the instructions said came in at more than 11% alcohol. In August 1931, Vino Sano had a shop on Fifth Avenue directly opposite Marble Collegiate Church and crowds outside it. The Wire report explained the crowds in one sentence. The bricks turn into wine if you dissolve them in water and don't drink it soon enough. Federal agents raided the shop and carried out roughly 3,000 bricks. 3 operators were arrested. The Wire added, the 10 young ladies who sold the bricks with instructions on how not to turn the bricks into wine were gallantly released. The men arrested made a complaint. Agents weren't raiding their competitors. The competitor they named was Fruit Industries, the cooperative representing the 20,000 California grape growers under the California Grape Control Plan. And it sold a concentrate called Vine-Glo, the keg from the Chicago ad that printed section 29. By August 1931, the Federal Farm Board, an agency of the same federal government, had lent Fruit Industries $2,585,000 and agreed to lend another $1 million. The industry had also asked the board for $9,800,000. The board refused. And then, in 1931, a Washington paper explained why the federal prohibition director wasn't going to do anything about any of it. Amos W. Woodcock, the paper reported, wouldn't interfere, because the warning itself had become the seller's legal way out. The paper put it plainly, the salesmen warn you that each brick will produce intoxicating liquor unless you are careful, and that lets them out. What finally closed the loophole wasn't a raid, and it wasn't the brick. It was another section of the same law, codified as Section 30. It shall be unlawful, it began. And what followed was a list. Utensils, machines, tablets, 10 items you couldn't sell if they were meant for making illegal liquor. The last 2, direction or recipe. You can't raid a sentence, but you can outlaw one. Direction, recipe. The instructions were never a way around the statute. They were named inside it. The case that used it, the same prosecution that held the memorandum book, was heard in Missouri. The defendants were Ukiah Grape Products Company and Albert E. Brunett, the manager of its Kansas City office. Their defense was that customers had been told to pasteurize the concentrate, so it could never become illegal. The company's president testified to it under oath. Then the court set down one flat sentence. There was no other testimony on the part of any witness, either for the government or the defendants, that customers were instructed to pasteurize the product. Not one government witness, not one of their own. On October 16, 1931, District Judge Merrill E. Otis found the product was not a fruit juice, not grape juice, but something inherently capable of and designed to become a beverage of 8 to 14% alcohol, 51 pages. Both defendants guilty, 5 counts of sale and 2 of possession each. The exemption that held the trade up covered only a man who pressed his own fruit for his own home, and only so long as he didn't intentionally and actively permit it to become intoxicating, in fact. Prohibition ended on December 5, 1933. Cooperage had dried out. Machinery was dated. Nationally, 268 bonded wineries remained. Legitimate distribution channels and markets had withered. And the vineyards themselves were the bill. Acres and acres of lesser grape varieties had to be removed and replanted with the higher value grapes preferred for making table wine. The Alicante Bouschet that Prohibition had paid for was now a cost. It had to come out of the ground. Prohibition didn't kill American wine. It kept it alive in a shape that had to be torn out and replanted. Survival had a price, and the price was the wine. And the paragraph on the package, Judge Otis had already read it. The company, he wrote, taught him in great detail exactly what to do to transform that preparation into an alcoholic beverage. And, having told him exactly what to do, bade him not to do it. The warning was never the charge. It was the proof. They studied it with great care. Not that they might know better how to obey it, but that they might find some way to circumvent it. The evidence had been sitting on a drugstore shelf the whole time. Real stories from the ground up. That's what this channel is for. Subscribe.